John, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. My name's John McKenna. I live in Melbourne, Australia, and I have a disability which is called Arthrogryposis Multiplex Congenital. What's it mean? Well, you could go to Google, or I'll give you a very quick snapshot now. From birth, I was born with lots of twisted limbs, and currently I use an electric wheelchair, and I'm one of five kids, and I love life.
And what parts of your body are most affected? And what do they stop you from doing that most people take for granted?
Sure. Well, when I was born, my body was very twisted, including my hands, my feet, my hips, and my knees. So as a child with arthrogryposis, like I have, there's lots of corrective surgery. So mum and dad back in 1962 would sit down with the doctor and sort of say, okay, what are we going to do and how are we going to do it and what will be some of the benefits for John? So it was quite rare. So there's nowhere that they could go and do some research. There was a lot of guesswork. My mum is a Christian, so she did lots of praying and they made some good decisions. So I'll give you one example. When I was born, I had one arm, and I'll go back a little bit so you can see. This arm was straight. Sorry, this arm was permanent, straight, and this arm was all right. And mum and dad thought, John, I guess you want to hug people, do you? I said, yes, please. I like hugging. Okay, so let's bend that arm. So it's now permanently bent. Guess what I could do? I could also drink a glass of water by putting the glass on his hand and going up. So there was lots of interactions with health practitioners, such as OTs and physios, and trial and errors. Another example are my hands. So you can see I was born with a hand that shape. After surgery, the hand is now that shape. Pros and cons, as far as can I grip better? Can I turn? So did surgery work? And I'm pleased to say in most cases it did. Actually, all cases did. And the most tricky or concerning one idea was where we started talking about my scoliosis. That's, of course, curvature of the spine. That was a bit of a risky one because it's back in those days, it's very close to the spinal cord, and it was risky. So mum and dad made the call, no, we won't bother with that one. So yeah, a lot of corrective surgery, a lot of time in hospital. Um, and I'm going to call it trauma as a child because I missed a few Christmases. Part of the procedure, I was on my bed on my back for 6 months in traction, being stretched. There's a whole lot of happy stories I could tell you when you're in traction. And when you vomit, guess what? You vomit up in the air, comes back in your face. Yuck. So I know it sounds awful, but these are memories I have as a kid in hospital with surgery. And I can look back and say it was very traumatic then, but character building. I believe I'm a better person for support from my parents, family, and friends. And yeah, that's about it in a nutshell.
So many people with long-term conditions or rare diseases get used to a certain level of pain or discomfort. How do you decide what is normal for you and what needs medical help?
It's a really good question because all the medical help I received was up until the age of about 12, 13. So they tried me with calipers and crutches. Can we get John to walk a little bit? Every time John fell over, he broke a limb. So it got to a stage where, okay, so walking with calipers and crutches, which was very slow, and the risk of falling then resulted in a fracture. So that's when there was discussions around getting an electric wheelchair. When you talk about pain, um, I'm not in a lot of pain at all. As I've got old, of course, I've got skin issues and my scoliosis has become more severe. But general pain, not because of my disability. I think it's just uh, who John is with regards to levels of pain. Um, I'm always off the conversation we had a long time ago, or a few days ago, where we spoke about. I really embrace the opportunity to talk to other adults who have arthrogryposis, so we can bounce ideas off and experiences with each other on what pain do you get and why do you get it. So I've learned a lot from other people.
And have your symptoms changed as you have got older? For example, more fatigue, more joint pain because according to the available data, your condition mainly causes joint contractures. So does it cause or lead to more joint pain as you get older, or any new secondary problems from years of strain?
The quick answer is no. It's because I've always got that little voice in the back of my head. John, you're 63. You're getting old. If I complain to my mother, she reminds me, John, you're getting old like me. So is it connected to my disability? I'm not sure. I don't need to really do to find out, go to Google to find out. I just know that I've got different strategies to dealing with pain. And that's around being in the moment with regards to the right people. I do daytime meditation, and I like to laugh and be grateful that I have a great support network around me.
Do you remember the first time you realized that your body was different to other kids?
I'm going to say no, because one of 5 kids, and so let me rephrase. Of course, the turning point for me was they'd all jump on their bike and go to school. I'd get picked up by a blue bus, so that was made me special because I couldn't talk about what happened on the way home from school on the bike. I had to talk about me going into a bus. So yeah, I felt very different then. Other little things like all my brothers and sisters were doing homework after school. Not me. I was watching television. So that's why there was that moment where mum and dad stepped in and say, okay, John, we know you're at a special school. We know you are receiving therapy around OT and physio, but academically you're not being challenged. So they made the tough call to pull John from a special school and put him into mainstream. And that was done at the age of 16.
And at what point did you start to be included in decisions about surgery and treatment? Because you said that you had a lot of corrective surgeries. So yeah, at what point did you start to be included in decisions about surgery rather than just being the patient on the table?
Well, I guess there was a part of that which was research, where even as a kid, and mum and dad said, the doctor's never seen anybody like you before. So I'd have those moments where I'd be on the bed and doctors and physios and OTs and nurses would all come up and have a probe and a touch and a pull and a twist. And I felt very different then. And I won't forget those days. I've got a picture in my room right now where, as a 7-year-old, I'm lying on a black sheet naked with a camera above, just looking at all the deformity. And they would then use that into books and discuss with other doctors about this condition I have. As far as conversations with mum and dad about decision making on the next operation, that happened probably when I was about 10 or 11. They had great respect for me, but they knew there were some times where I wasn't going to be told. They say, tomorrow, John, you're going to have surgery. I would cry and be scared. But that happens with kids. You know, there is any sort of parent listening to us will say you don't tell kids everything all the time straight away. Some things are just needed to happen. But I did know that if I were going to hospital the next day, by coincidence, I got a whole lot of good toys the day before. And then the penny dropped. I know what's happening tomorrow. I'm going in for more surgery. So I often laughed with my parents about the little games they played about making me happy the day before. But yeah, I had no choice but to have faith in mum and dad. And I could feel back then about how it was hard for them. Don't forget, I'm one of 5 kids. I'm the second youngest. Their role was to make my life good. It was never discussed whether I'd go into an institution. They agreed that I will stay in their family home forever. So I'm very grateful for that. And they just want to make sure that I could function to be independent. And I think this was succeeded.
Let's talk about the important message that you want to circulate to clinicians working with rare genetic conditions. There are many clinicians still meet rare conditions with curiosity first and humanity second. And even most of the time, it is the parent role to explain this rare syndrome condition to the clinicians. So, what is one concrete behavior you like every young doctor, nurse, or therapist to change tomorrow?
To make time and to understand what is the best way to communicate to this person on the bed. I'll get off topic a little bit, but you know, we often hear about when a person's dying, all the doctors stand around the person who's dying, and actually they're hearing what's going on. but unfortunately, that's not taken into consideration. So what I'm getting at is be aware of your voice and your tone when talking about me, and be very clear that John, he could be under anaesthetic or coming out of surgery, but he's a person who's got feelings. So it's the basic things like using my name, introduce himself, just show rapport before the tough questions about, does this hurt? Can you lift this? Can you turn this? Get that human thing going first, and don't be afraid to talk to my mum and dad, or or friends who are with me at the moment. But it's about that initial connection. If I've got a bit of empathy going and rapport going with the doctor or the nurse, that helps a lot. In past, where I've had situations where I've broken a limb and the ambulance have come to my house to assist me, I've been able to use humour a lot because I know they've come in very nervous. They've never seen anybody with my body shape and they don't know what to do. So I will have a little joke with them if appropriate. And all of a sudden, I can see that empathy and rapport change in their face. And now we can get the job done. And let's talk about John's broken leg. But you've got to take the time to get the connection. And this is, I can talk, I'm very lucky because I'm able to speak. But for people who have intellectual disabilities or other type of speech impairments, the practitioner needs to do some homework before even going into that room to talk.
Before I ask about institutionalization and respite, could you share your story of institutionalization or the past decades so that listeners can better understand the questions that I'm going to ask you? For example, those respite stays were highly regimented, early showers, early bedtimes, and very little choice, as you've mentioned in listenable podcasts. So I'm interested in how that environment shaped your sense of independence. You also describe your family as loving and supportive at the beginning of this interview, yet you talk about being placed in institutions while they went on holidays. So I would like to hear how you hold both those truths together now.
Great question, Lydia. Sure. So, yes, I'm one of five kids and have a great family. But there were times when my parents and the family were going to go to the beach. Now, it wasn't really practical in those days to take John and the electric wheelchair onto the beach and onto a boat. So, people look at this, hear me, and even now they question, but why aren't you traumatized over this? I'm not, because in 2026, of course, we've got a lot more options for people with respite. And is respite a dirty word? Not really. Everybody has burnout, whether it be parents and burden of care. We quite often hear those words of burden of care. And my wife and I often talk about burden of care. And I think it's a conversation that has to be had. But going back to my scenario, so yes, I would go to an institution for 2 weeks perhaps while my family went away on a holiday. That was a real shock for me. As I mentioned in other publications, I'd be in bed by 5 o'clock because my shower was at 3 o'clock because all the staff had to go home at 6 o'clock. And that was a big deal for me. And it was the old-fashioned institutions dressed up in pajamas. You see it on TV back in the old days. And so it was really tough. But and then from there, like I said, I made the choice to move out of home, and that was my choice, which is really good because I was mindful the mum and dad are getting older, and I wanted to be my choice when it's time to leave home. And I had that opportunity to move to an institution because that's all there was in those days. There was no individualized funding like we do have now in Australia. So the institution I chose was quite modern. I was able to go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. So there was real freedom. But guess what, Lydia? A lot of those people in that institution had come from institutions all their life. They didn't know that they could stay awake or stay in the wheelchair till 10 o'clock. So I had to really, I liked the freedom, but I felt like I was very much a rebel because I was coming home after a few drinks at 11 o'clock at night and I was the only person doing this. So it was that whole adjustment with moving from institutionalization to mainstream and how that works for everybody.
But thinking back to your respite and institutional stays, did you feel that safety was more valued than your independence? And how did that affect your sense of self?
So safety as a 16 or 18-year-old, like us all, Matt, let's just have fun. So I had the opportunity to live that life. So when we talk about safety, it's more when I'm sort of living by myself or with my wife, safety comes into it. So when you talk about safety, are you talking about safety in the home or safety in the community?
Safety at home.
In home. Well, for me, I've been very fortunate where I use appropriate technology. I have a team of support workers, um, and Google helps me a lot, electric wheelchair. So I've got all the bells and whistles when it comes to technology. So I'm as independent as possible and safe. Um, and so that's, I do feel very safe with regards to my current situation living. But at the same time, sometimes being too regimented and predictable, I don't have the opportunity to be impromptu, which means something that wasn't planned, all of a sudden I'm now going to this. So that's a real joy for me when I have that opportunity in relation to my life being so structured with routine and carers. So I know I'm going off topic a little bit, but it's still a big deal for people that may line up everything to be live independently and safe. But all of a sudden you're taking away dignity of risk from me because I can't make any mistakes. And this is where professionally I work with a lot of parents who have children with disabilities. And we're always unpacking that. What does dignity of risk look like? Can we allow your adult child to experience changes and not to mollycoddle too much? Mollycoddle is wrapping that child up in cotton wool so they can't hurt themselves. That's not always a good thing.
If staff medical practitioners in hospitals or nursing home care providers ask you now what a good life or good care looks like for you, how would you describe it?
One, where I'm being listened to, and I've very much respect health practitioners, and I acknowledge they've done the study, and they'll know things like pressure sores, sleep apnea, but then I just asked if they could now also connect with John McKenna and me about my lifestyle. So really, an example for me at the moment, Lydia, is I do have a pressure sore on my left side of my bottom. And in the perfect world, the nursing practitioner, the wound care practitioner, would love me to stay in bed for 6 weeks and get the skin nice and tough. Is John McKenna going to stay in bed for 6 weeks? No. So I think it's about, where possible, understanding my lifestyle and who I am, taking account my mental health, that I must function as a human in society. However, we need to protect the pressure sore. So it's about give and take. So I would expect practitioners to really learn about the personality of the person and be mindful of, yes, apply these methods and these treatments that are going to help, but get the balance right with regards to personality and my wishes and my limitations.
John, you're now 63 years old, right?
Correct.
Do you think that the older in institutions, their own wishes or preferences are really listened to or not listened to in Australia, for example?
Well, I've got a really good example of that because at the age of 18, I moved into an aged care facility because my living arrangements fell apart and I wasn't with my parents, and I was in another country town 2 hours from my home in Melbourne, Australia. So I was in a nursing home basically, and I really saw firsthand from a senior's perspective, aged care, what that looks like, where human rights should be there, but it's very limited for elderly people. I know your question's talking about me, but I'm able to look through different lenses. As a 20-year-old living in an aged care facility for 4 years, I really struggled there, but I had no choice because I was running a business. And that was the situation. Once again, I'm a better person because of that experience. So I think it's about um, just understanding that um, everybody has goals and dreams and what's needed to make it all happen. And luckily in Australia right now, institutionalization, does still exist, depending on the person's support needs. But a lot of people with disabilities are now living out in the community. And that's a good and a bad thing. That gets back to, we don't do it because they should be out there. what needs to happen is, what does the person want? Where do they want to live? If there is a 20-year-old that wants to live in an aged care facility, that's not a bad thing. Just have the conversation with the people. I know we're going off on a bit of a tangent at the moment, but I'm very passionate about listening to people. I talk a lot, but it's best to avert recently. As you get older, I'm listening more so, and it's so important.
If you could redesign respite for kids with complex disabilities, including intellectual disabilities and rare disease today, what would it definitely include and what would it definitely exclude or avoid?
I would definitely like to see integration with able-bodied children also. So it's not all in the one bus, or not everybody's going bowling together. So, and I think if a child's leaving a family home for respite reasons, I'd like to think the provider of the service who is going to be the respite really understand that Peter loves having hot dogs on a Tuesday night. So understanding where Peter was living, and you're now taking him out of that environment into another one, and that's fine. But it's just all about the research and the effort that goes into, so it's not a shock for Peter, and it can be fun. Respite is not a dirty word, but it's just all about, if it's done appropriately, where all the stakeholders are consulted with, including Peter.
For rare genetic disease advocates like me, what are some practical ways, not just theoretical frameworks, that we can check whether we are beside people, not speaking over them?
Okay, so a couple of gold rules. Try not to presume too much. Try not to presume. A lot of people presume because the last person you've interacted with, for instance, they may have been blind. Everybody who's blind have different scenarios. We all know this. So, but when we're talking about advocating with people, it is really important to understand where you're going to position yourself in that advocacy. Is it beside, is it behind, or is it in front? And this, once again, goes to general humans, not just disability, parents, brothers, sisters, other environments. We all want to help each other, which is great. But just make sure you're doing it for the right reason. And what's the purpose of the support you're giving? And is the person you're supporting, are they involved in the decision that they're going to receive support? Now, I know that's very twisted like noodles, but what I'm trying to say is there are so many scenarios, whether we're talking a child or an adult with an intellectual disability, efforts need to be made to communicate with this person, and so that the person liaising with the support person is not presuming too much, and a little bit of research goes into the person's life and their goals before help is offered.
What do you think rare disease advocates get right about visibility and support? And where do we still miss people like you?
You say, just to clarify, you say disease advocates?
Yes, rare genetic disease advocates.
Sure. So I guess the word itself, rare, sends off little flags, doesn't it? If you unpack the wording, rare is rare good or bad? And I love the way your YouTube talks about the power of rare, which is really important. So I think if you unpack rare and both understand that's where we're coming from, and that's what I'm just sorry, I'm struggling with this quick answer. Let's keep talking about it because it's a great question, but I don't think I'm delivering the right answer to you. So I'm going to ask you again, please. Just say that again.
What do you think that rare genetic disease advocates get right about visibility before moving on to the second part of that question? How do they get right about visibility and support for the affected individuals?
Is it about knowing the starting point is knowing the person and how they communicate? And if you've done that homework or the research beforehand, and then it's about whether you're working against a plan or what are you trying to achieve? My favorite word is purpose. When there's interaction, you've got two purposes. You've got the advocate, disease advocate, and you've got the person himself. So the interaction we're having, what's a good outcome look like? What's the bad outcome look like? And what does in the middle look like? It gets back to the fundamentals, and I'm often using examples like this when talking to people with intellectual disability where I'm hearing George is nonverbal. And I get very upset because they say, do we know what it looks like when George is happy? We do. Do we know what it looks like when George is sad? We do. Okay, well, there's our starting point. Let's build on that. Let's try and unpack what's needed or what George wants. And I like using the word humans a lot because we can hear about rare disease and disabilities and practitioners, but a lot of it comes back. Let's step back a bit. We're humans. We breathe, we poo, we laugh, we cry. And quite often I'm telling practitioners who come in to see me, whilst respecting confidentiality and privacy and respecting barriers, but I know that practitioner is going to go home to their own home and talk to their partner or the sibling or their kids. So I just try and remind them of that after they've interacted with me, to be grounded about being a human and don't think that they've got to offer all the answers, because they're trying to, but don't try too hard.
Moving on to the National Disability Insurance Scheme, or the systems and the long view. You have lived through pre-NDIS, the early startup NDIS, and now a more mature scheme. What is your message to governments about building systems that work for people with rare, complex conditions over a lifetime, not just in election cycles?
Great question. And just for the audience, just to quickly explain, before the National Disability Insurance Scheme, we had what was called block funding, where all the money would be given to an organisation to supply care for a person. The NDIS came along 10 years ago, where there was individual funding given to me, as in John, and I was then told, John, have a good life and go and buy your supports. That all sounds good. So, and you most importantly, you have a plan, and on that plan you have goals. So there's some guidelines of how I can spend the money. I can't go and spend it on a grocery, on clothing or food. It can only be for my support needs. Once again, John McKenna is very lucky. He's verbal and he knows what he wants. Going back to your question a bit more, where the government haven't really addressed it enough is to understand those people that don't have the voice or not being listened to about what they want and what's a good life for them. And we don't want to blame anybody, but that still gets back to, we presume because this person's nonverbal and they have diabetes and the epilepsy, they're probably going to need these supports. And that's not fair, because in actual fact, they may be homosexual, lesbian, or Aboriginal, and they've got so many other parts of their life, and has not been addressed when doing an assessment on people. So it's that dirty word, presume. If we presume too much, it backfires, where the person's not getting the right support.
Is there a question people never ask you, but you wish they would?
I love your questions. It's a really good one. I'd like them to identify other parts of me apart from my disability when they first meet me. And I'll give you an example. Sometimes I wear a lovely brooch, and at the moment I'm wearing colourful shoes. So people with disabilities really like it when a conversation starts with identifying a person's interests and who they are. And the world's getting better at doing this. But I can see fear on people's faces when they first meet me. And I'm not going to change that, but I guess, and once again, I'm lucky because I can talk. But we're all going to judge people. And if we can unjudge people, that helps a lot. But to be specific about your answer, I wish that more people would ask me about how are you going? How's life as a human? Quite a simple question. Are you happy? Are you sad? Not necessarily a stranger, but let's get down to that, the human stuff. Anything I can do for you, not because I'm in a wheelchair. I know people with disabilities love the opportunity to give back to others. We don't often get that chance.